Travelling this ancient road is something of a pilgrimage for cheese lovers like me. I'm heading to the home of what the British call the king of cheeses.
Stilton. But there's a strange twist to the story behind this wonderful royal cheese. Stilton was never made in Stilton.
Give fire!
Standing high on a hill overlooking the Vale of Belvoir is the majestic stately home of the 11th Duke of Rutland. Once the site of a Norman castle, it takes its name from the French Belvoir, meaning beautiful view. The English didn't like the French association, so they changed the pronunciation to Beaver. The surrounding countryside is a patchwork of small fields and lush pastures, which are famous for producing the rich creamy milk responsible for making Stilton cheese. The Frisian cows grazing here produce enough fresh milk to make more than 1 million Stilton cheeses every year. And more than 80% of those are enjoyed here in Britain. This creamy blue cheese was once made by dozens of small farms throughout the Melton Mowbray district. But these days, there are just 6 dairies producing Stilton within the counties of Leicestershire, Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire, and none are close to the village of Stilton.
So why is Stilton called Stilton? The answer lies with this 17th century pub, but more about that later. Right now, like anyone else associated with Stilton, I'm heading out of town to Winston Churchill's birthplace.
This is Blenheim Palace, and this year Churchill's former home is playing host to a 3-day cheese festival known as the British Cheese Awards.
Bitter notes.
More than 800 cheeses from all over the country have been entered into the awards. And 170 cheesemakers are hoping to win a gold medal as the ultimate recognition of their hard work and skill.
I'd say lovely mellow appearance.
It has okay lovely flavour, peanut berry.
In the blue cheese category, defending champions Cropwell Bishop Creamery are hoping to win another medal this year with their award-winning Stilton.
Hi Ian, how are you feeling about tonight?
I don't think you can ever be confident at a show of this sort of standard. There are just so many excellent cheeses entered.
It takes more than 78 litres of fresh milk to make every 8 kilo Stilton, and here at Cropwell Bishop they work 7 days a week in order to keep up with demand during the busiest times of the year. Early in the morning, warm pasteurised milk is transferred to large stainless steel vats where a special starter culture is added, followed by a small amount of vegetarian rennet, and of course the crucial ingredient, blue mould culture made of Penicillium roqueforti. The vat is left for 3 hours whilst the curd slowly sets, and then it's gently cut by hand using a special wire frame. After the curds and whey have separated, they are released down a chute into another vat known as the cooling table and left overnight to knit and slowly drain. Not all Stilton are the same. Over 250 years, it has evolved from a seasonal farm cheese renowned for its dusty brown rind covered in maggots and jumping mites to a predictable creamery cheese. Stilton made from raw milk sadly became extinct in the 1980s, and some producers have more recently adopted mechanical shortcuts. Each has their own idea on how to make the best cheese. And an example of this is the difference between Cropwell Bishop and nearby Colston Bassett Dairy. Geographically, the two rivals are separated by just a few miles, but philosophically, there is one key difference in the way they make Stilton. And it's all to do with how they handle the curds at this early stage of the process. Randolph Hodgson from Neal's Yard Dairy in London personally selects every batch of Colston Bassett Stilton he sells. And he even insists that his cheeses are specially made using traditional animal rennet.
One of the reasons I really like the Colston Bassett Stilton is this hand ladling that you can see. It's a very, very gentle way of treating the curd. And because you're handling it so gently, it means that you can use less rennet. And that ends up with a different structure, and I think a different flavour in the finished cheese. But as you can see, it's a huge amount of work. There's a lot of work moving that curd from here to there. By treating the curd like this, each piece of curd ladled individually, you can see the texture. It opens up, it's light, it's intact, it's one piece rather than lots of bitty bits that would happen if you'd run the curd down from a higher level, as most of the producers do. And I think this is just very important in the finished cheese.
It's been 24 hours since the milk arrived at the dairy, and now the curds have been cut and milled. And it's time to add fine dry salt and place them into hoops. The salt helps harden the soft curd and provides an important control in mould development when it comes to the ripening cheese. Each cheese hoop holds about 11 kilos of fresh curd. The young cheeses are carefully turned every day. This helps to evenly drain the cheese without pressure and ensures a distinctive loose open texture, with small nooks and crannies for the blue mould to grow into later on. Five days later, the cheeses end up here. And the hoops are removed.
So Andy, tell me what's going on here.
Right, here we're doing the rubbing up process.
Rubbing up?
Yeah, rubbing up, Will. It's a traditional process involved with Stilton. As you can see, the guys are rubbing up the cheese with the knives, forming a nice sort of creamy consistency on the edge of the Stilton, and then finishing it off in a nice sort of smooth manner. A bit like icing a cake, really. The idea, though, is so that we get good coat formation and it makes the cheese more presentable.
Rubbing up complete, the cheeses are moved through a number of different maturing rooms over the following months. Each room has its own unique environment, and temperature, humidity and airflow is carefully controlled to ensure the ideal ripening conditions. During their stay here, the cheeses are turned by hand and pierced several times with long stainless steel needles. The needles are set at a special angle to ensure the cheeses don't crumble or fall apart. It's the tracks they leave behind that allows oxygen to enter the heart of the cheese, activating the growth of the greeny blue mould. Finally, it's time for the Stilton to be graded. A sample is taken from every batch with a special cheese iron to ensure they're ready to be packed.
Now, after all that hard work, the cheeses are being judged by the ultimate palates. The judges at the British Cheese Awards are deciding who's going to take home the medals.
Let's try it one more time.
Right, okay.
It's rounded off the acidic top notes.
The judges are drawn from all facets of the food industry.
Beautiful, beautiful.
What would we say about the texture?
Wholesalers, retailers, journalists.
Beautiful age, beautiful rind.
The most important qualification being a love of good cheese.
I think that's
I like it,
improved since we
especially
last
below.
tried it as well.
I think that's very pleasing cheese.
To start with, they're asked to judge each category of cheese on the basis of merit, rather than pick first, second or third place.
It's delightfully crumbly.
This means that if no cheese is worthy of merit, then no medals are awarded.
It's almost like a young Tilsiter, you know, the texture, buttery creaminess.
On the other hand, the system could mean 3 gold medals for a category if cheeses are exceptional.
That's very delicious in the smell.
Yes.
Then shall we taste it?
Yes.
Judge Trevor Jones is presiding over the blue category.
Good creamy texture.
He and his team will determine which blue cheeses will win, and if any of the Stilton entered will be good enough to be crowned king of British blue cheeses.
The first thing you look for is the appearance, and on the scoring system, appearance counts for at least 10 of the points. And then there's the texture of the cheese, and then you look for the flavour. So the texture gets about 15 points, but the majority of points go towards the flavour. It's the real flavour we're looking for. And with things like Stilton, you're obviously looking for a nice even crust with a sort of like a reasonably mouldy, crusty skin to it, without being too moist. It needs to be fairly dry. And then when you go into the cheese with the cheese iron, you're then looking to make sure that the veining is sufficiently gone through all the cheese. Then it's the flavour. And you're looking for a nice long flavour. And it's a difficult thing to describe, but you're really going for how long the flavour lasts in the mouth.
The reverence with which Stilton is held can be traced right back to its creation in the 1700s. It's said to have originated at this magnificent Jacobean house called Quenby Hall, where it was once called Lady Beaumont's cheese. Farmhouse cheese was made in the Midlands during the 18th century, mainly during summer. And given there was no refrigeration in those times, many naturally turned blue. But it was the housekeeper at Quenby Hall, a Mrs. Elizabeth Scarborough, who is credited with inventing the recipe for making the first Stilton. She refined the recipe in this kitchen, and several centuries later, there are hopes of making the cheese here again.
I've always loved eating Stilton. Right as a child, we used to have it for breakfast, and my father used to pick up half a Stilton when he was riding past one of the local dairies. So we still eat it, and I'm very, very passionate about it. I will be making Stilton again here. I think it's important to relink the house with the making of Stilton and re-establish a tradition which has not been around in this house for 100 years.
With his portrait hanging in the ballroom to prove it, this magnificent house now belongs to Squire Delisle and his family.
It was built as a family home, albeit a large one, but originally it was built as a community of people. You just didn't have a nuclear family living here. You had also, aunts, uncles, grandparents living in the same building. We have 3 children, and it's actually a very warm house to live in because it was built for local gentry. It wasn't any of the court aristocracy. They're very comfortable. Gets a bit cold in winter.
Can you tell me, how did the cheese actually come to be made here in the first place? What was the history behind that?
Well, At the Black Death in the Middle Ages, the population dropped radically in this part of the county, in Leicestershire and the Midlands. About 50% of the population died. And so most of the countryside was put down to grass because lack of manpower. So we had cattle and sheep. And for the last 400 or 500 years, we've been 80 to 90% grassland here. And obviously, the main products of grassland are either meat from the sheep or the cattle, or milk, and pigs, which was a byproduct of the milk, and therefore milk and oatmeal pork pies. So you had a very good ecosystem where you had the milk production, which had to be, you either drank it raw, obviously fresh, or you stored it in the shape of cheese or yogurt. You then, when you made the cheese, you had the whey, waste product which you fed to the pigs. You made the pigs. Another way to store pig meat is bacon and pork pies. And therefore, it was very much a virtuous circle based on the grassland of this part of the country.
Stilton may have originated at Quenby Hall, but it was the two daughters of Elizabeth Scarborough who were responsible for making the cheese world famous. It was inside this house in the village of Wymondham that one of the daughters, Frances Paulette, perfected the art of making the cheese, which even by Edwardian times was described by cheesemakers as more trouble than babies to look after. Using her family ties, she sold her cheese to her brother-in-law, Cooper Thornhill, who was the landlord of a pub called the Bell Inn in the centre of the village of Stilton. From the 1730s, the village became an important staging post for changing horses on the Great North Road, which ran from London to Edinburgh. And amongst the famous patrons were Lord Byron, Daniel Defoe, and according to the locals, even the highway robber Dick Turpin. It was the many travellers passing through Stilton that spread the word about the wonderful creamy blue cheese they had eaten there. And by association, the celebrated name was created. It's amazing to think that a housekeeper and her daughters were responsible for creating this benchmark of British food.
So that's the English side of the story. But across the Channel, the French have another version. They claim that Forme d'Ambert, a cylindrical cheese from the Auvergne, is actually the ancestor of Stilton.
Regardless of who was responsible for inventing Stilton, it is unique among traditional English cheeses, because unlike most of its counterparts, it cannot be copied. The name has been held under copyright since the 1900s by the Stilton Makers Association, and the European Commission gave the cheese name Protected Designation Origin or PDO status in 1996, meaning strict rules now apply to production. To qualify as genuine Stilton, the cheese can only be made from pasteurised milk sourced from the counties of Derbyshire, Leicestershire and Nottinghamshire. It must be made in a traditional cylindrical shape and be unpressed and allowed to form its own natural rind and have blue veins radiating from its centre. Randolph Hodgson has his own opinion on what makes great Stilton.
Randolph, tell me, what do you really look for in a Stilton?
Well, if you look at these cheeses, they're quite young. They're just starting to form their coats. And I love that sticky orange coat, which is quite typical here at Colston Bassett. This cheese is more matured. You can see the coat's drying off. It's had all its piercing done. It'll be, I don't know, just starting to blue and break down. And if we look at it with this cheese iron, this one's not quite mature, but it's worth trying. Now, as the bore comes out, you can see it's got just the beginnings of the blue veining. But the important thing is not too much blue. The important thing is the effect of the blue on the rest of the cheese. And it's beginning to, the blue makes the cheese go creamy. It's a crumbly cheese that goes creamy. So it's the creaminess I'm looking for. What do you think of that?
Quite young, but...
It's young, but you can see it's still got a lot of acid, but it's just beginning to break down and go creamy.
Back at the Cheese Awards, the judges have reached a verdict, and it's time for the winners to be announced. But before that, the cheese-loving public have arrived at Blenheim Palace to have their say.
What we do is, and the idea of it was that, you know, I couldn't bear to see all these wonderful cheeses go to waste. And so I decided what I would do is to have a kind of like a festival afterwards so that people would come along and not only see these cheeses, but attend all sorts of tastings. And in fact, we got 55 different tastings or masterclasses in the Sainsbury's School for Big Cheeses. So there's about 6,000 places available. And then we've got Britain's biggest cheese market, which has over 100 cheesemakers exhibiting.
Can people come and buy?
And people can come and buy, they can taste, they can do a masterclass.
Stilton is one of the most popular cheeses in Britain, particularly around Christmas time, when as a special gift it's often found in these little ceramic pots. Whilst they look cute, I don't recommend them. I think the best way to buy Stilton is cut from a fresh, whole, crusty wheel, and always try before you buy. It's often sold in convenient pre-cut wedges wrapped in a special film. But it's worth remembering this process must be carefully managed, or it will spoil the flavour, because it's a natural living cheese. And there's another myth about Stilton that needs to be cleared up.
Creamy, crumbly texture and syrupy, salty flavour of Stilton goes wonderfully with port. Everyone knows that. But don't fall for the old tradition of putting port into Stilton. It's a terrible thing to do to good Stilton and terrible for good port. The best way to enjoy them is to take a glass of port, a piece of Stilton, and let the marriage begin in your mouth.
There's plenty of wine and cheese being enjoyed under this big top. It's prize-giving time at the British Cheese Awards.
If you look on the back of your menus, you will see the order in which the awards will be presented tonight.
The awards have become increasingly popular as an important annual event in the specialist cheese calendar. For the Cropwell Bishop team, the moment of truth has arrived.
On behalf of the Cheese Seller Company, it gives me much pleasure to announce the winner of the Best Blue, which I'm glad to announce for the second year running is Organic Stilton from Cropwell Bishop Creamery. Well done, Cropwell Bishop.
Oh, I'm absolutely delighted, I really am, and I'm just so pleased for all our staff who've put so much effort into making our cheeses. You know, there's no better recognition for quality than to win an award here.
Another gong for Cropwell Bishop and recognition as the champion Stilton maker. In the years ahead, the competition may well become a lot tougher as new cheesemakers take up the challenge of trying to create the king of English cheeses.